Hi everyone, I'm Darshana. So in this video, I thought of basically extending from the previous video, the English video that I did on science and materialism. So what I wanted to highlight was that in that video, if I briefly recap that science or the philosophy of science is not compatible with the materialistic worldview, because the materialistic worldview leads to a total subjectivity. So when I say that it leads to a certain total subjectivity, I think it's important to uh, make a distinction between free will and determinism, because just because there's free will, it doesn't mean that there's everything is deterministic. You can have, so I think materialists believe that there's no free will, and that is the logical conclusion of materialism, because if the conscious mind can be reduced to the matter, then eventually there can't be free will. But that doesn't mean that there is everything is deterministic. You can have a probability distribution of thoughts or actions. So it's like the differentiation between a classical computer and a quantum computer, or a quantum, some kind of a quantum mechanism, where you can't directly say that either this or this is going to happen. It will be a probability distribution, but still, regardless, it's still conditioned, right? I mean, even a quantum computer or a, even if we are like classical robots or quantum robots, we are still conditioned by the matter or the material experiences and our brains. So it's still, regardless of whether we are classical computers or quantum computers, we are still conditioned. So we are still bound by subjectivity, and if we are bound by subjectivity, we cannot make objective claims. And if we cannot know or make objective claims, or we are inherently incapable of thinking objectively, then it's kind of not incompatible with the uh, endeavor of science, where the idea is to develop an objective knowledge, right? And through the scientific method, so the idea of scientific objectivity is that there's a presumption that there is objectivity, and human mind can comprehend that objectivity, or at least get closer to that objective, right? So that was the main idea behind the previous video, highlighted by the previous video. So in this one, I thought of discussing, so in that case, what is the philosophy, or what is the worldview, or maybe even religion, that is most compatible with the philosophy of science and the scientific method and the whole scientific endeavor. Now, to get some hint from that, we can refer to what Einstein believed about religion, or his philosophical views, because I think one thing is he's kind of perhaps the most well-known theoretical physicist, and maybe one of the greatest scientific minds ever lived. And there's a lot of confusion and even some controversy around what actually were his philosophical beliefs. But I just thought of highlighting, like taking some excerpts from some of his writings, and I will add these in the as references in the description. So one of the quotes is this, sort of a well-known quote. Scientific research can reduce superstition by encouraging people to think and view things in terms of cause and effect. Certain it is that a conviction akin to religious feeling of the rationality and the intelligibility of the world lies behind all scientific work of a higher order. This firm belief, a belief bound up with a deep feeling in a superior mind that reveals itself in the world of experience, represents my conception of God. In common parlance, this may be described as pantheistic, right? Within brackets it says Spinoza. So we'll come to Spinoza in a moment. And there's another famous quote. Yeah, I'll extract a part of that. Um, yeah, maybe scientific research is based on the idea that everything that takes place is determined by laws of nature, and therefore this holds for the actions of people. For this reason, a research scientist will hardly be inclined to believe that events could be influenced by a prayer, that is, by a wish addressed to a supernatural being. However, it must be admitted that our actual knowledge of these laws are only imperfect and fragmentary, so that actually the belief in the existence of basic, all-embracing laws in nature also rests on a sort of faith. All the same, this faith has been largely justified so far by the success of scientific research. But on the other hand, everyone who is seriously involved in the pursuit of science becomes convinced that a spirit is manifesting in the laws of the universe, a spirit vastly superior to that of man, and one in the face of which we, with our modest powers, must feel humble. In these ways, the pursuit of science leads to a religious feeling of a special sort, which is indeed quite different from the religiosity of someone more naive, right? So I think, so he talks about this person called Spinoza. So Spinoza is actually his full name is Baruch Spinoza. I hope I pronounced that name correctly. And Spinoza was a philosopher that lived in Netherlands in the 17th century. So, and Spinoza's view is more of a so he like refuted the idea of a personal God. Like when we hear the word God, we think of a person, right? Someone with a long beard and elderly, kind, benevolent figure. Someone like this granddad in Lord of the Rings. But that was like against the largely held view among theistic people at the time. So Spinoza thought of God as a universal order, cosmic consciousness, um, that encompasses everything, a universal order that is like everything is God kind of view. So I think I will add some um, like videos and descriptions about Spinoza's view, and there's a lot of debate about that. But I guess it's safe to say that he believed in a divinity that is all encompassing and kind of more fundamental to the human existence. And that is, it seems, what Einstein believed was something closer to that. That is, the matter, or like what we observe from our sensory perceptions, is kind of just a manifestation of an underlying reality or divinity. Because I think Spinoza thought it is a divine thing because we can't directly observe it, but it is kind of more fundamental, so it can't be reduced to the matter. It is more fundamental than the matter. It's a cosmic order of a cosmic consciousness. And I think it's very important to understand why Einstein arrived or like became to accept Spinoza's view of God, or why he wasn't just an atheist or a materialist, right? Obviously he wasn't a materialist. He had a slightly different view of the world. So I think why Einstein arrived at that conclusion was um, that there is a cosmic order to things, right? I mean, even in science. So it is kind of apparent that there is. So if you think of any law on physics, it may work relatively well in on Earth or in some other planet or in some other solar system or like a distant planet or a star, right? So there's some order, like it appears that there's an order, and it doesn't have to be that way. So I'll add another video by like excerpt from a interview with Dr. Michio Kaku, who kind of proposed this idea of string theory, and he also like nicely like he gives a very nice description of this Einstein's view, and it seems that Michio also kind of accepts that view, that there's something more than the matter, right? There's something more fundamental, a cosmic order, because I mean, if you think about it, these laws need not work everywhere, right? It doesn't have to be that way. The universe can be more chaotic, but it appears to be more orderly, and the question is, where does this order come from? What is the source of that order? And that is where this, I think that's how Einstein arrived at this conclusion, that there must be something more than the matter, that's a cosmic consciousness kind of. So I'm not saying that I personally believe that, but I think that is kind of in line with the scientific thinking, because in the scientific method also there's this underlying belief that, in philosophy of science, there's this underlying belief that there is a reality that is not directly observable by our human faculties, but so that's why we have to develop these abstract theories, abstract concepts, generalizable concepts and theories and laws, where we can understand the cosmic order. So it's a way, in a way, like as Einstein puts it, it's sort of a spiritual, a different kind of spiritual practice, like trying to get closer to the God. I mean, if you put it in those terms, right? So, and I think Spinoza's there has been some analysis on Spinoza's views, and I mean, there has been some comparative studies on what Spinoza wrote and the some of the Eastern traditions, I think. So if you take like some of the Eastern religions and philosophies, like Advaita Vedanta, which is a Hindu school of thought, and even Mahayana Buddhism. In Mahayana Buddhism also there's this idea of a universal emptiness, right? Or in Advaita there's this idea of a Nirgun Brahman, that encompasses everything. So there you can draw some parallels. I'm not saying that it's the same thing, but there are some similarities, and there has been some, I mean, detailed studies on that in philosophy, I guess. But the difference is, I think Spinoza's what Spinoza proposes more in line with the philosophy, and these Eastern traditions are more, there is a spiritual path as well. Those are like more spiritual traditions. So that's basically what I wanted to highlight in this video, that because in popular culture there's a notion that that science, the most compatible worldview with science or the scientific method or the philosophy of science is materialism, right? Philosophical materialism. And in the popular culture also we see that highlighted, like if you take a TV show like Big Bang Theory, there's a character called Sheldon, and Sheldon is a theoretical physicist, and he looks like the smartest guy in the whole show, and at the same time he's a materialist, right? We can see that he's a materialist by the things that he say, but that is not what Einstein believed, right? So, and that is I think that is not the most compatible worldview with science, because materialism leads to total subjectivity, and that is not compatible with the goal of the scientific method or the philosophy of science. It is what is more compatible with the philosophy of science or the scientific method, which has this underlying notion that there is reality, there is a reality, objectivity, and we are humans, which gives a goal for the humans to know it, right? So without that, there's no point in trying to understand that objective truth. So that whole endeavor is more in line with Spinoza's philosophy, I guess, or Spinoza's worldview. So I think Einstein arrived at that philosophy, or became to accept that in a very conscious way, rather than, I don't think he was conditioned by his childhood to think like that. I think he made a very conscious choice in accepting Spinoza as well, because he understood as a scientist what he is doing is closest. Philosophically, it is most in line with what Spinoza's philosophy, right? So that's basically what I wanted to talk about today, and just share your thoughts and comments in the comment section, and I'll share some of the references in the description. Thanks a lot for viewing, and see you again with another video. Thank you.